Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting: if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. The Calling. Episode 2. After that, calm descended. Like the calm before the storm, only in reverse. The nurses put dinner in the oven, then sequestered themselves in Dr. Gill's office, on a conference call, not to be disturbed. No one had disagreed with Ms. Wang's explanation of events. No one tried to say it had been an accident. No one even seemed surprised that Liz had almost put someone's eye out. When dinner time came, Mrs. Talbot served the food, then retreated into the office again. Liz joined us, wan and quiet. Simon snuck her a juice box, though we were supposed to be having milk. Tori hovered over her, coaxing her to eat. Even Ray and Peter made efforts at conversation, as if to distract her. Only Derek and I didn't participate. After dinner, Tori reminded Liz it was movie night, when they could get a DVD delivered. She gave Liz the honor of choosing, but Liz seemed overwhelmed by the responsibility and looked to us for help. Simon made suggestions, but said he wouldn't be watching it. He and Derek had a project due the next day. Liz finally settled on a romantic comedy. While she and Tori went to tell the nurses, Ray announced she had to fold the now clean laundry. I offered to help. We each carried a basket to the room Ray shared with Tori. I could tell neither was pleased with the arrangement. I swore I saw pencil marks on the windowsill to divide the room in half. Tori's side was so clean it looked like mine when I'd first walked in. Nothing on the walls. Nothing on the bed or the floor. Every surface was bare, except 2 picture frames on the dresser. One held a shot of Tori and her parents and the other of a huge Siamese cat. Ray's half had enough clutter for both of them. Hooded sweatshirts on the bedposts, textbooks balancing precariously on the desk, makeup left open on the dresser, drawers leaking clothing. The room of someone who didn't see why she had to put things away when she'd only be using them again the next day. Her walls were covered with taped photos. Ray set her basket on Tori's bed, then closed the door. Okay, I could beat around the bush, but I hate that, so I'm going to come right out and ask. Did I hear right? That you're here because you see ghosts? The words "I don't want to talk about it" rose to my lips. But I did want to talk about it. I longed to pick up the phone and call Carrie or Beth, but I wasn't sure how much they'd heard about what happened and whether they'd understand. The person who seemed least likely to make fun of me or gossip about my problem was right here, asking for my story. So I gave it to her. When I finished, Ray knelt there, holding up a shirt for at least 30 seconds before realizing what she was doing and folding it. Wow, she said. No wonder I'm in here, hey. And it started right before you got your first period? Maybe that's it. Because you were kinda late, all that stuff built up, and then, bam. Super PMS. She laughed. So have you looked it up? Looked what up? The custodian. When I frowned, she went on. You got chased by a guy in a custodian's uniform, right? And he was burned, like he died in some fire or explosion. If it really happened, it would have made the papers. You could look it up online. I won't say the thought hadn't occurred to me, but I'd only given it permission to flit through my brain, like a streaker at a football game, moving too fast for me to get a good look. What if I was really seeing ghosts? My brain flashed "don't go there" neon warnings, but some deeper part was fascinated, wanted to go there. I rubbed my temples. Ghosts aren't real. Ghosts are for crazy people. What I saw were hallucinations, and the sooner I accepted that, the sooner I'd get out of here. It'd be cool if it was, I said carefully. But Dr. Gill said seeing visions is a clear sign of a mental illness. Ah, the label. God, they love their labels here. Can't even let a girl get through her first day without slapping one on. Mine's pyromania. She caught my look. Yeah, I know. We aren't supposed to share. Protecting our privacy. I think that's crap. They just don't want us comparing notes. She lined up socks and started matching them. You don't agree? Maybe with something like pyromania. It sounds almost cool. But there are other things, labels, that we might not want to share. Like what? I concentrated on mating the socks for a minute. I wanted to tell her. Like the stuff about the ghosts. As scared as I was of sounding like a freak, I wanted to tell someone, to see what she said, get a second opinion. They say I have schizophrenia. I studied her reaction. Just a small frown of confusion. Isn't that multiple personality? She asked. No. Schizophrenia is, like, you know, schizo. Her expression didn't change. So it's seeing things and stuff. I lifted a white sail of a t-shirt, with faintly dingy armpits. No need to check the name. I folded it and added it to Derek's pile. There's a whole lot of other symptoms, but I don't have them. None of them. Guess not. She eased back, uncrossing her legs. See, that's my problem with it. You have one weird episode and they slap on a label, even if you just have the one problem. It's like coughing and they decide you've got pneumonia. I bet there are a lot more symptoms to pyromania, too. Ones I don't have. Her gaze fixed on a red and a blue sock, and she stared intently at them, as if she could will them to turn purple and match. So what else comes with schizophrenia? Dr. Gill didn't say exactly. Hey. I guess I could look it up on the internet. I should. We should. Schizophrenia and pyromania. I'd like to know more. To be sure, you know. Especially with the way things are going with Liz. She rubbed her mouth with the back of her hand, still staring at the mismatched socks. I think you're going to have the room to yourself soon. Maybe real soon. They're transferring her. Probably. They've been talking about it for a while. This place is for kids who have problems, but they're not too bad and they're getting better. A couple weeks after I got here, they transferred a guy named Brady. He wasn't getting worse or anything. Not like Liz. He just didn't want to get better. He didn't think there was anything wrong with himself. So off he went. Taught me a lesson. I might not like their labels and their meds, but I'll keep my mouth shut, play the game, and get out of here the right way. And go home. A moment of silence, neither of us moving. Then she yanked a blue sock from my hand and waved it in front of my face. Whoops! I hadn't even realized I'd been holding it. She folded the blue pair together, then shoved the lone red sock under Tori's bed. Done. It should be movie time soon. She piled folded laundry into one basket. Notice how quick Simon was to get out of watching the movie? Couple of real scholars, those two. Anything to avoid hanging out with the crazy kids. I got that impression. Simon seems nice, but... She handed me one basket and took the other. He's as much of a diva as Tori. They'd be a great pair. Derek might be a jerk, but at least he's honest about it. Simon makes nice during the day when he has to hang with us, then bolts the minute he can escape with his brother. Acts like he doesn't belong here. Like he doesn't have any problems and it's all a huge mistake. What is he in here for? Believe me, I'd love to know. Him and Derek, both. Simon never goes to therapy, but Derek gets more than anyone. No one ever comes to visit them, but sometimes you'll hear them going on about their dad. Simon's dad, I think. If he's so great, why'd he dump them here and take off? And how do two guys from the same family, but not blood brothers, both have mental problems? I'd love to see their files. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious about Simon. And maybe Derek, if only because I had the feeling I might need some ammunition against him. But I wouldn't want anyone reading my file and I wasn't going to help Ray read theirs. We couldn't risk taking a peek tonight anyway, she said. With what's going on with Liz, they'll be on high alert. I don't want to get kicked out for corrupting the new kid. Maybe I'd get tossed out for corrupting you. She caught my grin and laughed. Oh, yeah, you're trouble, girl. I can tell. She scooted me from the room and shut the door behind us. 9. I'm not keen on romantic comedies. This may be like a guy admitting he doesn't like car chases, but Ray nodded off a few times, too, so I guessed this wouldn't have been her choice either. I stayed awake by deconstructing the screenplay, which was so predictable I'd bet my college fund the writer was a student of screenwriting guru Robert McKee. But as I watched the silly movie and munched popcorn, I finally relaxed. Talking to Ray had helped. She didn't think I was crazy. She didn't even think I was schizophrenic. For the first time since my breakdown, things didn't look so bad. Maybe life as I knew it hadn't really ended in that classroom. Maybe I was overreacting and going all drama queen. Did the kids at school know what had happened to me? A few saw me run down a hall. More saw me carried out on a stretcher, unconscious. Big deal. I could return in a few weeks and most probably wouldn't even notice I'd been gone. Tomorrow, I'd email Carrie, tell her I was sick, and see what she said. That's probably exactly what she heard, that I had something like mono. I'd get through this. Whatever I thought of their diagnosis, now wasn't the time to argue. I'd take my meds, lie if I had to, get released from Lyle House, and get on with my life. Chloe? Chloe. Liz's voice echoed through the deep caves of dreamland, and it took me a few minutes to find the way out. When I opened my eyes, she was leaning over me, bathing me in toothpaste breath, her long hair tickling my cheek. The hand clutching my arm kept trembling even after she stopped shaking me. I pushed up on my elbows. What's wrong? I've been lying here for hours, trying to think of some way to ask you, some way that won't sound weird. But I can't. I just can't. She backed away, her pale face glowing in the darkness, hands tugging at her nightshirt neckline, like it was choking her. I scrambled up. Liz. They're going to send me away. Everyone knows they are, and that's why they're being so nice to me. I don't want to go, Chloe. They'll lock me up, and she hiccuped deep breaths, hands cupped over her mouth. When she looked at me, her eyes were so wide the whites showed around her dark irises. I know you haven't been here long, but I really need your help. Okay. Really? I stifled a yawn as I sat up. If there's anything I can do. There is. Thank you. Thank you. She dropped to her knees and pulled a bag from under her bed. I don't know what all you need, but I did one at a sleepover last year, so I gathered up everything we used. There's a glass, some spices, a candle. Her hand flew to her mouth. Matches. Oh, no. We don't have any matches. They keep them locked up because of Ray. Can we do it without lighting the candle? Do what? I rubbed my hands over my face. I hadn't taken a sleeping pill but still felt that weird fogginess, like I was swimming through a sea of cotton balls. What exactly are we doing, Liz? A séance, of course. The sleep fog evaporated, and I wondered if this was a prank. But I could tell by her expression that it wasn't. I remembered Tori's words at lunch. Poltergeist. I said carefully. Liz flew at me so fast I smacked backward into the wall, hands flying up toward her off. But she only pounced down beside me, eyes wild. Yes, she said. I have a poltergeist. It's so obvious, but they won't see it. They keep saying it's me doing all this stuff. But how would I throw a pencil that hard? Did anyone see me throw it? No. I get mad at Ms. Wang and the pencil flies and hits her and everyone says, "Oh, Liz threw it," but I didn't. I never do. It's the poltergeist. Right. I think it's trying to protect me because every time I get mad, things start flying. I've tried to talk to it, to make it stop. But it can't hear me because I can't talk to ghosts. That's why I need you. I struggled to keep my expression neutral. I'd seen a documentary on poltergeist activity once. It usually did happen around girls like Liz, troubled teens desperate for attention. Some people thought the girls were playing pranks. Others believed the energy the girls gave off, hormones and rage, actually made things move. You don't believe me, she said. No, I didn't say. You don't believe me. She rose to her knees, eyes blazing. Nobody believes me. Liz, I. Behind her, the hair gel bottles rocked. Empty hangers in the closet chattered. I dug my fingers into the mattress. Oh, okay, Liz. ISSC. No, you don't. She slammed her hands down. The bottles jetted into the air, smashing against the ceiling with such force the plastic exploded. Hair gel rained down. Do you see? Why yes. Her hands flew up again, like a conductor hitting the crescendo. A picture leaped from the wall. It smashed onto the hardwood floor, glass spraying. Another fell. Then a third. A sliver of glass shot into my knee. A button of blood welled up and streamed down my leg. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the picture above my bed quaver. It sprang from its moorings. "No!" Liz cried. I dove. Liz hit my side, shoving me out of the picture's path. It struck her shoulder. She twisted. We both rolled from the bed, hitting the floor hard. I lay on my side, catching my breath. "I'm so sorry," she gasped. "I didn't mean. Do you see what happens? I can't control it. I get mad and everything." "You think it's a poltergeist?" She nodded, her lip quivering. I had no idea what was going on. Not a poltergeist though, that was nuts, but if she thought it was, then maybe if she thought I'd told it to stop, it really would stop. "Okay," I said. "Get the candle and wheel." The door shot open. Mrs. Talbot's bathrobed form stood silhouetted in the doorway. She flipped on the light. I drew back, blinking. "Oh my God," she breathed, barely above a whisper. "Elizabeth! What have you done?" I jumped to my feet. It wasn't her. I. For once, I wasn't stammering. I just couldn't think of more words. Her gaze swept across the room, taking in the glass littering the floor, the hair gel dripping from the ceiling, the exploded makeup painting the wall, and I knew there was no reasonable explanation. Her gaze fell to my leg and she let out a squeak. "It's okay," I said, drawing my leg up and swiping the blood. "It's nothing. I cut myself. Shaving. Earlier." She picked her way past me, eyes fixed on the glass-carpeted floor. "No," Liz whispered. "Please no. I didn't mean it." "It's okay, hon. We're going to get you help." Miss Van Dop strode in, carrying a needle. She sedated Liz as Mrs. Talbot tried to calm her, telling her they were only transferring her to a better hospital, one more suitable, one that could help her get well faster. When Liz was unconscious, they shooed me from the room. As I backed into the hall, a hand walloped me in the back, slamming me into the wall. I turned to see Tori looming over me. "What did you do to her?" she snarled. "Nothing." To my shock, the word came out clear, defiant even. I pulled myself up straight. "I'm not the one who told her I could help." "Help?" "By contacting her poltergeist." Her eyes went wide, with that same horrified expression as when Simon told her to stop acting. She turned away and stumbled into her room. 10. The paramedics came for Liz. I watched her go, asleep on the stretcher, just like I'd been taken from school. Deluxe transportation for crazy kids. Miss Van Dop insisted I take half a sleeping pill. I gave in, but when she tried to follow it with an extra dose of my anti-hallucination medicine, I hid that pill under my tongue. I hadn't seen or heard anything since lunchtime. While that might have been the meds kicking in, I couldn't help hoping Ray's wild theory was right, that my break with reality was only a temporary mental vacation, brought on by stress and hormones. With any luck, I was already making the return trip to sanity. I had to test that theory. So I'd save the pill and, if I saw anything, I'd take it. I offered to help clean the room, but Mrs. Talbot took me downstairs for a glass of milk, then settled me on the sofa. I drifted off, waking when she came to trundle me back to bed, and was asleep again before I could pull up the covers. I awoke to the fruity smell of Liz's hair gel. I floated there, dreaming I was trapped in a vat of cotton candy, the sweet smell making my stomach churn as I fought through the sticky strands. Finally I broke free, eyes flying open, gulping air. "Chloe." I blinked. It sounded like Liz's voice, timid and wavering. "Are you awake, Chloe?" I rolled onto my side. Liz sat on the edge of her bed, wearing her Minnie Mouse nightshirt and grey socks covered with purple and orange giraffes. She wiggled her toes. "Funky, hey? My little brother got them for me last Christmas." I pushed up, blinking harder. The cotton candy from the sleeping pill still encircled my brain, sticky and thick, and I couldn't seem to focus. Sunlight streamed through the Venetian blind, making the giraffes on Liz's socks dance as she waggled her toes. "I had the weirdest dream last night," she said, gaze fixed on her feet. "You and me both," I thought. "I dreamed they took me away and I woke up in this hospital. Only I wasn't in a bed but on a table. A cold, metal table. And there was this woman there, like a nurse, wearing one of those masks. She was bending over me. When I opened my eyes, she jumped. Her gaze shot my way, and she managed a tiny smile. Kinda like you do sometimes." Like I startled her. "She calls this guy over, and I ask where I am, but they just keep talking. They're mad because I wasn't supposed to wake up and now they don't know what to do. I try to sit, but I'm tied down." Liz bunched her nightshirt in her hands, kneading it. All of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move, couldn't yell, and then, she shuddered, arms wrapping around herself. "I woke up here." I sat up. "I'm going to help you, Liz." "Okay." She scuttled back on the bed, pulling her knees up. She opened her mouth, but she was shaking too badly to form words. I stood, the wood floor icy beneath my feet, and crossed over to sit beside her. "Do you want me to try talking to your poltergeist?" She nodded, chin drumming against her chest. "Tell it to stop. Tell it I don't need its help. I can look after myself." I reached out to lay my hand on her arm. I saw my fingers make contact, but they kept moving. Kept going. Through her arm. As I stared in horror, Liz looked down. She saw my hand pass through her. And she started to scream. 11. I tumbled off her bed, hitting the floor so hard pain jolted through my spine. When I scrambled up, Liz's bed was empty, the comforter wrinkled only where I'd been sitting. I took a slow look around the bedroom. Liz was gone. Gone? She'd never been here. They'd taken her away last night. I hadn't dreamed that part hair gel still freckled the ceiling. I pressed my palms to my eyes and backed up until I hit my bed, sitting down on it and inhaling deeply. After a moment, I opened my eyes. Sticky strands of sleep were still woven around my brain. I'd been dreaming. No, not dreaming. Not imagining things. Hallucinating. Dr. Gill was right. I had schizophrenia. But what if it wasn't? What if Ray was right, and I was seeing ghosts? I shook my head sharply. No, that was crazy talk. That would mean Liz was dead. That was nuts. I was hallucinating, and I had to accept it. I reached under my mattress, pulled out the pill I'd stuffed there the night before, and swallowed it dry, gagging in protest. I had to take my meds. Take them and get better, or I'd be shipped off to a real mental hospital, like Liz. Only Ray joined me for breakfast. Tori was still in her room, and the nurses seemed content to leave her there. I picked at my cereal, scooping one Cheerio at a time so it looked like I was eating. I kept thinking of how scared Liz had been. Terrified of being sent away. Then talking about her dream of being tied down, unable to breathe. A hallucination. In real life, things like that don't happen. And in real life, teenage girls can't make bottles explode and pictures fly off the walls. Miss Van Dop, I said when she came in to lay the breakfast table for the boys. About Liz. She's fine, Chloe. She's gone to a better place. Those words sent a shiver through me, my spoon clattering against the bowl. I'd like to talk to her if I could, I said. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Or thank her for helping me my first day. Miss Van Dop's severe face softened. She needs to settle in, but we'll call her in a few days and you can speak to her then. See? Liz was fine. I was being paranoid. Paranoia. Another symptom of schizophrenia. I pushed back the stab of dismay. The nurse turned to go. Miss Van Dop? Sorry. I was talking to Mrs. Talbot yesterday, about emailing a friend. She said I needed to speak to you. Just use the email program to write your letter and click send. It'll sit in the outbox until I enter the password. Some instructions from my school had arrived, so after breakfast, I showered and dressed as the guys ate, then headed off to class with Ray. Tori stayed in her room and the nurses let her. That surprised me, but I guessed it was because she was upset over Liz. I remembered Liz saying Tori was here because she was moody. There'd been a girl at drama camp a couple years ago whom I'd overheard counselors calling moody. She'd always seemed to be either really happy or really sad, with no in-between. With Tori absent, I was the only 9th grader. Peter was in 8th, Simon, Ray, and Derek in 10th. It didn't seem to matter much. Kind of like running a one-room schoolhouse, I guess. We shared a room with 8 desks and we all worked on our separate assignments as Ms. Wang went around, helping and quietly giving short lessons. Maybe knowing Ms. Wang had been partly responsible for Liz's leaving influenced my opinion of her, but she seemed to be one of those teachers who trudges through her job, watching the clock, waiting for the day to end, or a better job to come along. I didn't get much work done that morning. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't stop thinking about Liz, what she'd done, what had happened to her. The nurses hadn't seemed at all surprised by the damage in our room. That's just what Liz did, like with the pencil. She got mad and threw things. But she hadn't thrown that stuff. I'd seen pictures fly from the wall when she'd been nowhere near them. Or had I? If I was schizophrenic, how was I supposed to know what I'd really seen or heard? And if paranoia was another symptom, how could I even trust my own gut feeling that said something bad had happened to Liz? Ray was in session with Dr. Gill for the first part of the morning. When she returned, I spent the rest of the class eagerly awaiting break time, so I could talk to her. Not about Liz and my fears. Just talk to her. About class, last night's movie, the weather, anything that would clear Liz from my head. But she was having problems with a worksheet, and Ms. Wang made her stay through the break. So I promised to grab her a snack, then trudged out, heading for the kitchen, sentenced to another hour or two trapped in my own head, thinking about Liz. Hey! Simon jogged up beside me in the hall. You okay? You seem quiet this morning. I managed a wan smile. I'm always quiet. Yeah, but after last night, you have an excuse. Probably didn't get much sleep, hey. I shrugged. Simon reached for the kitchen door. A hand appeared over my head and grabbed it for him. I didn't jump this time, just glanced back, and murmured a good morning to Derek. He didn't answer. Simon headed into the pantry. Derek stayed in the kitchen, watching me. Studying me, again, with that spookily intense look of his. What? I didn't mean to snap, but the word came out harsh. Derek reached for me. I stumbled back, and realized he was reaching for the fruit bowl, which I was blocking. My cheeks burned as I darted out of the way, mumbling an apology. He ignored that, too. So what happened last night? He asked as he grabbed 2 apples in one big hand. Hap pee. Slow down. My face heated more with anger now. I didn't like it when adults told me to slow down. From another kid, it was worse. Rude with a grating edge of condescension. Simon stepped from the pantry, a box of granola bars in hand. You should have an apple, Derek said. That's not. I'm good, brother. He flipped one granola bar to Derek, then held out the box for me. I took 2, with thanks, and turned to leave. Might help if you talk about it, Simon called after me. I turned back. Simon was unwrapping his granola bar, gaze averted, trying to look casual. Derek didn't bother. He leaned back against the counter, chomping into his apple, staring at me, expectant. Well, Derek said when I stayed silent. He gestured for me to hurry up, spill all the gory details. I'd never been one for gossip. Maybe that's not what they wanted, maybe they were just curious, concerned even. But it felt like gossip, and Liz deserved better. Ray's waiting for me, I said. Simon stepped forward, raising a hand as if to stop me. Then he glanced at Derek. I didn't catch the look that passed between them, but it made Simon pull back, nod a goodbye to me, and busy himself unwrapping the rest of his bar. The door was still swinging shut behind me when Simon whispered, "Something happened." Yet. I let the door close, and stood there. Derek said something else, but his low rumble swallowed the words. I don't know, Simon said. We shouldn't. Chloe. I wheeled as Mrs. Talbot stepped into the hall from the living room. Is Peter around? She asked. Her broad face beamed. In class I think. Could you tell him I need to see him in the living room? I have a surprise for him. I glanced at the kitchen door, but the guys had gone silent. I nodded to Mrs. Talbot and hurried off. Peter's parents had come to take him home. He'd known it would be coming soon, but they'd wanted to surprise him, so we had a little party, complete with cake. Low-fat, organic, frosting-free carrot cake. Then his parents went upstairs to help him pack, while Simon, Derek, and Ray returned to class and I had my session with Dr. Gill. 20 minutes later, from her office window, I watched his parents' minivan back out the drive and disappear down the street. Another week and I'd be doing the same. I just had to stop thinking about Liz and ghosts and concentrate on getting out. 12. After lunch, it was time for math. That was one class where the tutor needed to know exactly where I was in the program and my math teacher hadn't sent over my work yet, so I was allowed to skip it for now. Math was also the class Derek had been sitting out the day before, and he did so again, taking his coursework into the dining room as Ms. Wang gave a short lesson. I guessed he was doing remedial work and needed the quiet. He went his way and I went mine, into the media room to write that email to Carrie. Getting the words right took time. The third version finally seemed vague but not like I was obviously avoiding anything. I was about to hit send when I stopped. I was using a communal account. What would come up in the sender field? Lyle Group Home for Mentally Disturbed Teens? I was sure it wouldn't be that, but even just Lyle House would throw Carrie off, maybe enough for her to look it up. I switched to the browser and searched for Lyle House. Over 1 million hits. I added Buffalo and that cut my hits in half, but a scan of the first page showed they were all just random hits, a mention of a house on Lyle in Buffalo, a list of Lyle Lovett songs including the words house and Buffalo, a house representative named Lyle talking about Buffalo Lake. I moved my mouse over the send button again, and stopped again. Just because Lyle House didn't have a cheerful website with a daisy border didn't mean Carrie couldn't find it in the phone book. I saved the email as a text document with an obscure name. Then I deleted the message. At least with a phone call, I could probably block call display. There were no telephones in the common area, so I'd have to ask to use the nurse's phone. I'd do that later, when Carrie would be home from school. I shut down Outlook and was about to turn off the browser when a search result caught my eye, one about a Buffalo man named Lyle who died in a house fire. I remembered what Ray had said last night about looking up my burned custodian. Here was my chance to settle the battle between the side that said you're hallucinating, take your meds and shut up, and the side that wasn't so sure. I moused to the search field, deleted the words, then sat there, fingers poised over the keys, every muscle tensed, as if bracing for an electric shock. What was I afraid of? Finding out I really did have schizophrenia? Or finding out I didn't? I lowered my fingers to the keys and typed. A.R. Gurney School Arts Buffalo Death Custodian. Thousands of hits, most of them random matches to A.R. Gurney, the Buffalo playwright. Then I saw the words tragic accident and I knew. I forced my mouse up the screen, clicked, and read the article. In 1991, 41-year-old Rod Stinson, head custodian at Buffalo's A.R. Gurney School of the Arts, had died in a chemical explosion. A freak accident, caused by a part-time janitor refilling a container with the wrong solution. He'd died before I'd been born. So there was no way I could have ever heard about the accident. But just because I couldn't remember hearing about it didn't mean I hadn't caught a snatch of it, maybe someone talking in class, and stored it deep in my subconscious, for schizophrenia to pull out and reshape as a hallucination. I scanned the article. No picture. I backed out to the search page and went to the next. Same basic information, but this one did have a picture. And there was no question it was the man I'd seen. Had I seen the photo somewhere? You have an answer for everything, don't you? A logical explanation. Well, what would you think if you were seeing this in one of your movies? I'd run to the screen and smack this silly girl who was staring the truth in the face, too dumb to see it. No, not too dumb. Too stubborn. You want a logical explanation? String the facts together. The scenes. Scene 1. Girl hears disembodied voices and sees a boy who disappears before her eyes. Scene 2. She sees a dead guy with some kind of burns. Scene 3. She discovers that the burned custodian is real and died in her school, just the way she saw it. Yet this girl, our supposedly intelligent heroine, doesn't believe she's seeing ghosts? Give yourself a shake. Still I resisted. As much as I loved the world of cinema, I knew the difference between reality and story. In movies, there are ghosts and aliens and vampires. Even someone who doesn't believe in extraterrestrials can sit in a movie theater, see the protagonists struggling with clues that suggest alien invasion, and want to scream, well, duh. But in real life, if you tell people you're being chased by melted school custodians, they don't say, wow, you must be seeing ghosts. They put you someplace like this. I stared at the picture. There could be no question. Is that who you saw? I spun in my chair. Derek was there at my shoulder. For someone his size, he could move so quietly I'd almost think he was a ghost. Just as silent, and just as unwelcome. He pointed to the headline over the janitor's article. A.R. Gurney. That's your school. You saw that guy, didn't you? I don't know what you're talking about. He fixed me with a look. I clicked off the browser. I was doing schoolwork. For when I go back. A project. On what? People who died at my school. You know, I always heard art schools were weird. I bristled. Weird. You want something to research? As he leaned over to take the mouse, I caught a whiff of beau. Nothing flower wilting, just that first hint that his deodorant was about to expire. I tried to move away discreetly, but he noticed and glowered, as if insulted, then shifted to one side, pulling in his elbows. He opened a fresh browser session, typed a single word, and clicked search. Then he straightened. Try that. Maybe you'll learn something. I'd been staring at the search term for at least 5 minutes. One word. Necromancer. Was that even English? I moved the cursor in front of the word and typed define. When I hit enter, the screen filled. Necromancer, one who practices divination by conjuring up the dead. Divination? As in foretelling the future? By talking to dead people, from the past? That made no sense at all. I skipped to the next definition, from Wikipedia. Necromancy is divination by raising the spirits of the dead. The word derives from the Greek nekros, dead, and manteia, divination. It has a subsidiary meaning reflected in an alternative and archaic form of the word, nigromancy, a folk etymology using Latin niger, black, in which the magical force of dark powers is gained from or by acting upon corpses. A practitioner of necromancy is a necromancer. I reread the paragraph 3 times and slowly deciphered the geek talk, only to realize it didn't tell me anything more than the first definition. On to the next one, also from Wikipedia. In the fictional universe of Diablo 2, the priests of Rathma. Definitely not what I was looking for, but I ran a quick search and I discovered a role-playing game class called Necromancers, who could raise and control the dead. Was that where Derek got it? No. He might be creepy, but if he'd misplaced the boundary between real life and video games, he'd be in a real mental hospital. I returned to Wikipedia, schemed the rest of the definitions, and found only variations on the first. A necromancer foretells the future by talking to the dead. Curious now, I deleted define and searched on necromancer. The first couple of sites were religious ones. According to them, necromancy was the art of communicating with the spirit world. They called it evil, a practice of black magic and Satan worship. Did Derek think I was involved in black magic? Was he trying to save my soul? Or warn me that he was watching? I shivered. Aunt Lauren's women's health clinic had once mistakenly been the target of a militant pro-life group. I knew firsthand how scary people could get when they thought you did something that crossed their beliefs. I flipped back to the list of search results and picked one that seemed more academic. It said that necromancy was another older name for mediums, spiritualists, and other people who could talk to ghosts. The meaning came from an ancient belief that if you could talk to the dead, they could predict the future because they could see everything. They'd know what your enemy was doing or where you could find buried treasure. I switched to the next site on the list, and a horrible painting filled my screen, a mob of dead people, rotting and hacked up, being led by a guy with glowing eyes and an evil grin. The title, The Army of the Dead. I scrolled down the page. It was filled with stuff like that, men surrounded by zombies. I quickly switched to another page. It described the art of necromancy as the raising of the dead. I shuddered and flipped to another. A religious site now, quoting some old book ranting about foul necromancers who committed crimes against nature, communicating with spirits and reanimating the dead. 13. I stepped cautiously from the media room, expecting to find Derek lurking around the corner, waiting to pounce. The rumble of his voice made me jump, but it came from the dining room, where he was asking Mrs. Talbot when Dr. Gill would be ready to see him. I hurried into class. They weren't done with math yet, and Ms. Wong waved for me to take the seat next to the door. When the lesson finally ended, Derek lumbered in. I struggled to ignore him. Ray waved me to the desk beside hers. I bolted for it. Derek never even looked my way, just took his regular seat beside Simon, their heads and voices lowering as they talked. Simon laughed. I strained to hear what Derek was saying. Was he telling Simon about his joke? Or was I getting paranoid? After English, school was done for the day. Derek disappeared with Simon, and I followed Ray to the dining room, where we did our homework. I could barely finish a page on sentence diagramming. It was like deciphering a foreign language. I was seeing ghosts. Real ghosts. Maybe it would be different for someone who already believed in ghosts. I didn't. My religious training was limited to sporadic church and Bible school visits with friends, and one brief stint at a private Christian school when my dad hadn't been able to get me into a public school. But I believed in God and in an afterlife the same way I believed in solar systems. I'd never seen that matter-of-fact acceptance that they existed, even if I'd never thought much about the specifics. If ghosts existed, did that mean there was no heaven? Were we all doomed to walk the earth forever as shades, hoping to find someone who could see or hear us end? And what did the ghosts want from me? I thought of the voice in the basement. I knew what that one wanted: a door opened. So this spirit had been wandering for years, finally finds someone who can hear him, and his earth-shattering request is, "Hey, could you open that door for me?" What about Liz? I must have dreamed that. Anything else? I couldn't wrap my head around it. But one thing was certain. I needed to know more, and if the pills were stopping me from seeing and hearing the ghosts clearly, then I had to stop taking them. It's not going to happen to you. I turned from the living room window as Ray walked in. What happened to Liz? Getting transferred? That won't happen with you. She sat on the couch. That's what you're worried about, right? Why, you haven't said 10 words all day. Sorry. I'm just freaked out. I nodded. This was true, even if it wasn't about what she thought. I sat in one of the rocking chairs. Like I said last night, Chloe, there's a trick to getting out of here. She lowered her voice. Whatever you think about their labels, just nod and smile. Say yes, Dr. Gill. Whatever you say, Dr. Gill. I just want to get better, Dr. Gill. Do that, and you'll be following Peter out that front door any day now. We both will. Then I'll send you a bill for my advice. I struggled to smile. From what I'd seen so far, Ray was a model patient. So why was she still here? How long is the average stay? I asked. She reclined on the sofa. A couple months, I think. Months. Peter was here about that long. Tori a bit more. Derek and Simon, about 3 months. 3 months. I think so. But I could be wrong. Before you, Liz and I were the newbies. 3 weeks for each of us, me a few days more than her. I was told I'd only be in for 2 weeks. She shrugged. I guess it's different for you then, lucky girl. Or did they mean 2 weeks was the minimum? She stretched her foot to nudge my knee. Don't look so glum. The company's good, isn't it? I managed a smile. Some of it. No kidding, hey? With Peter and Liz gone, we're stuck with Frankenstein and the divas. Speaking of which, Queen Victoria is up and about, relatively speaking. She lowered her voice another notch. She's stuffed full of meds and totally out of it. I must have looked alarmed because she hurried on. Oh, that's not normal. They don't do that to anyone but Tori, and she wants it. She's the pill princess. If she doesn't get hers on time, she asks for them. Once, on the weekend, they ran out and had to page Dr. Gill for a refill, and whoa boy, she shook her head. Tori ran to our room, locked the door, and wouldn't come out until someone brought her the medication. Then she tattled to her mom and there was this huge uproar. Her mom's connected to the people who run Lyle House. Anyway, she's totally doped up today, so she shouldn't give us any trouble. When Mrs. Talbot rounded us up for dinner, I realized I hadn't told Ray about taking her advice and looking up the dead janitor. Tori joined us for dinner in body, at least. She spent the meal practicing for a role in the next zombie movie, expressionless, methodically moving fork to mouth, sometimes even with food on it. I was torn between feeling sorry for her and just being creeped out. I wasn't the only one left uncertain. Ray tensed with every mouthful, as if waiting for old Tori to leap out and jab her about her eating. Simon gamely tried to carry on a conversation with me and tentatively slanted questions Tori's way, as if afraid she was just playing possum, looking for sympathy. After that endless meal, we all fled, gratefully, to our chores, Ray and I on dinner cleanup, the guys on garbage and recycling detail. Later Ray had a project to work on, and Ms. Wong had warned the nurses that she wanted Ray to do it without help. So after telling Miss Van Dop that I'd be right back, I headed up to my room for my iPod. When I opened the door, I found a folded note on the floor. Chloe. We need to talk. Meet me in the laundry room at 7:15. Simon. I folded the note into quarters. Had Derek put Simon up to this when I didn't freak out over him calling me a necromancer? Did he hope I might give a more gratifying response to his brother? Or did Simon want to resume our discussion from the kitchen, when they'd asked about Liz? Maybe I wasn't the only one worried about her. I went downstairs just past 7, and used the extra time to ghost hunt, prowling the laundry room, listening and looking. The one time I wanted to see or hear a ghost, I didn't. Could I contact it? Or was it a one-way street, and did I have to wait until one chose to speak to me? I wanted to test that by calling out, but Derek had already caught me talking to myself. I wasn't taking that risk with Simon. So I just wandered, my mind automatically sliding behind a camera lens. Here, a voice whispered, so soft and dry it sounded like the wind through long grass. Talk to. A shadow loomed over my shoulder. I braced myself to see a vision of horror as I looked up into Derek's face. You always this jumpy, he said. Where did you come from? Upstairs. I'm waiting for some. I stopped and studied his expression. It's you, isn't it? You had Simon send. Simon didn't send anything. I knew you wouldn't come for me. But Simon. He glanced at his watch. For Simon, you're early. So did you look it up? So that's what this was about. You mean that word? I pursed my lips, testing it. Necromancer? Is that how you say it? He waved the pronunciation off. Unimportant. He leaned against the wall, trying for casual, uninterested maybe. His flexing fingers betrayed his eagerness to hear my answer. To see my reaction. Did you look it up? He asked again. I did. And, well, I don't quite know what to say. He rubbed his hands against his jeans, as if drying them. Okay. So, you searched for it and it wasn't what I expected. He brushed his jeans again, then closed his hands. Crossed his arms. Uncrossed them. I looked around, drawing it out, making him rock forward, almost bouncing with impatience. So, he said. Well, I have to admit, I took a deep breath. I'm not really into computer games. His eyes closed to slits, face screwed up. Computer games. Video games? RPGs? I've played some, but not the kind you're talking about. He looked at me, wary, as if suspecting I really did belong in a home for crazy kids. But if you guys are into them. I flashed a bright smile. Then I'm certainly willing to give them a shot. Them. The games. Role-playing, right? But I don't think the necromancer is for me, though I do appreciate the suggestion. Suggestion, he said slowly. That I play a necromancer? That's why you had me look it up, right? His lips parted, eyes rounding as he understood. No, I didn't mean. I suppose it could be cool, playing a character who can raise the dead, but it's just, you know, not really me. A little too dark. Too emo, you know? I'd rather play a magician. I wasn't. So I don't have to be a necromancer? Thanks. I really do appreciate you taking the time to make me feel welcome. It's so sweet. As I fixed him with a sugary smile, he finally realized I was having him on. His face darkened. I wasn't inviting you to a game, Chloe. No. I widened my eyes. Then why would you send me to those sites about necromancers? Show me pictures of madmen raising armies of rotting zombies? Is that how you get your kicks, Derek? Scaring the new kids? Well, you've had your fun, and if you corner me again or lure me into the basement. Lure you? I was trying to talk to you. No, I lifted my gaze to his. You were trying to scare me. Do it again and I'll tell the nurses. When I scripted the lines in my head, they'd been strong and defiant, the new girl standing up to the bully. But when I said them, I sounded like a spoiled brat threatening to tattle. Derek's eyes hardened into shards of green glass and his face twisted into something not quite human, filling with a rage that made me stumble back out of its path and bolt for the stairs. He grabbed for me, fingers clamping around my forearm. He yanked so hard I yelped, shoulder wrenching as I sailed off my feet. He let go and I crashed to the floor. For a moment, I just lay there, crumpled in a heap, cradling my arm and blinking hard, unable to believe what had just happened. Then his shadow fell across me, and I scrambled to my feet. He reached for me. Chloe, I staggered back before he could touch me. He said something. I didn't hear it. Didn't look at him. Just ran for the stairs. I didn't stop until I was in my room. Then I sat cross-legged on my bed, gulping oxygen. My shoulder burned. When I rolled up my sleeve, I saw a red mark for each of his lingers. I stared at them. No one had ever hurt me before. My parents had never struck me. Never spanked me or even threatened to. I wasn't the kind of girl who got into fist fights in cat fights. Sure, I'd been pushed, jostled, elbowed, but grabbed and thrown across a room? I yanked down my sleeve. Was I surprised? Derek had made me nervous from that first encounter in the pantry. When I realized he'd sent the note, I should have gone upstairs. If he'd tried to stop me, I should have screamed. But no, I had to be cool. Be clever. Bait him. Yet I had no proof except marks on my arm that were already fading. Even if I still had them when I showed the nurses, Derek could say I'd lured him into the basement and flipped out, and he'd had to grab my arm to restrain me. After all, I was a diagnosed schizophrenic. Hallucinations and paranoia went with the territory. I had to handle this myself. I should handle this myself. I'd led the proverbial sheltered life. I'd always known that meant I lacked the life experience I'd need to be a screenwriter. Here was my chance to start getting it. I'd handle this. But to handle it, I needed to know exactly what I was up against. I took Ray aside. "Do you still want to see Simon and Derek's files?" I asked. She nodded. "Then I'll help you get them. Tonight." 14. We found MRS. Talbot setting out the evening snack. Carrot sticks and dip. Yum. Whatever complaints I had about Annette, at least I could always count on brownies at home. Hungry, girls? I'm not surprised. No one ate very much at dinner. She held out the plate. We each took a stick and dipped it. Chloe and I were thinking, Mrs. T, Ray said. About Tori. She set the plate on the table, eyes downcast as she nodded. I know, dear. She's taking Liz's leaving very hard. They were close. I'm sure she'll feel better once they can talk, but until then she may feel a little down while we get her medication adjusted. We'll need you girls to be extra nice to her. Sure. Ray licked dip off her finger. We were wondering, though, whether it might be easier for her if she had the room to herself. I could sleep in Chloe's. Mrs. Talbot handed Ray a napkin. I don't want to isolate her too much, but, yes, she'd probably be happier alone for now. Just for now. The nurse smiled. No, you can move in with Chloe permanently, if that's what you'd both like. While Tori was downstairs watching television, Ray started to move, as if afraid Miss Van Dop or Dr. Gill would veto the change. She handed me a stack of t-shirts. It's Simon, isn't it? You want to know what Simon is in for? I don't. She draped her jeans over her arms and waved me out. You two have been chatting every meal. At first, I thought maybe he was using you to throw Tori off his trail, but she wasn't paying any attention today, and he kept talking. I'm not. Hey, you like him? That's fine. She opened Liz's bottom drawer. It was empty, every trace of her cleaned out while we'd been in class. I don't care for the guy, but that's just my opinion. Maybe he's just stuck up with me because I'm not in his league. League. She held up a pair of jeans and pointed to the label. You see anyone else in this place wearing jeans from Walmart? It's a private home. You gotta pay for it, and I bet it costs more than Motel 6. I'm the designated charity case. It's cool. You treat me fine. So did Peter, and a somber look around her new room. Liz. Derek's a jerk to everyone, so I don't take it personally. If I'm only getting the cold shoulder from Simon and Tori, I can live with it. That's why I think those two are perfect for each other, but if you like him and he likes you? None of my business. But you're smart to run a background check. She headed back to her old room, me at her heels. My friend's mom did that with a guy she was supposed to marry. Found out he had 3 kids he'd never mentioned. She grinned over her shoulder. I'm pretty sure Simon doesn't have kids, but you never know. As we finished clearing out her drawers, I considered letting it go at that. But I didn't want her thinking I was the kind of girl who gets into a new place and immediately starts scoping out the guys. If I wasn't ready to tell the nurses about Derek, I should tell someone. That way, I'd have backup for my story if I needed it later. It's not Simon, I said as we returned to her room, clothing finished. It's Derek. She'd been in the middle of plucking a photo from the wall and fumbled it, cursing as I rescued the fallen photograph. Derek? You like? God, no. I meant Derek's the one I'm checking out and not that way. She exhaled and leaned against the wall. Thank God. I know some girls go for the jerks, but that's just nasty. She flushed as she took the picture from me and reached for another. I shouldn't say that. It's not his fault, the whole, she faltered for a word. Puberty smackdown. A grin. Exactly. I should feel sorry for the guy, but it's hard when his attitude is as ugly as his face. She stopped, photo in hand, and glanced over her shoulder at me. Is that it? Did he do something? Why? Does he have a history of that? Depends on what that is. Being rude, yes. A jerk, yes. He ignores us except when he doesn't have a choice and, believe me, no one complains. So what did he do? I considered my words. I didn't want her to insist I talk to the nurses, so I left out the throwing me across the room part and just said he'd been following me, popping up when I was alone. Ah, he likes you. She handed me a photo to hold. No, it isn't like that. Uh-huh. Well, you'd probably rather it wasn't like that, but it sure sounds like it. Maybe you're his type. At my school, there's this guy I like, on the basketball team. He's even taller than Derek, but he always goes for tiny girls like you. I took another photo from her. That's not it. I'm absolutely certain of it. She opened her mouth and I felt a flash of annoyance. Why is it that every time a girl says a guy is bothering her, it's fluffed off with "oh, he just likes you," as if that makes it okay? Seeing my expression, Ray snapped her mouth closed and took down another picture. I said, he freaks me out and I want to see what his file says. Whether there's any reason to be spooked. Whether he has, a problem. That's smart. And I'm sorry. If he scares you, that's serious. I don't mean to make jokes. We'll get the facts tonight. 15. Bedtime at Lyle House was 9, with the lights out and the no talking rule coming into effect an hour later when the nurses retired. Each side of the upper level had a bedroom for its assigned nurse. Liz had said there was no door linking the boys' and girls' areas, but according to Ray, there was one between the nurses' rooms, which gave them quick access to the whole upper floor in an emergency. So while Ray swore Mrs. Talbot was a quick and sound sleeper, we had to take Miss Van Dop into account, too. An early break-in was too risky. Ray set the alarm on her sports watch for 2:30 and we went to sleep. At 2:30, the house was still and silent. Too still and too silent. Every creaking floorboard sounded like a gunshot. And in an old house, most boards creak. Ray followed me into the kitchen, where we took 2 juice boxes from the fridge and set them on the counter. Then I opened the pantry door, turned on the light, and returned to the hall, leaving both doors half open. Dr. Gill's office was at the west end, near the boys' stairs. Ray had checked out the lock a week ago. It was only a regular interior key lock, not much tougher than the kind you can pick with a coin. Or so she said. I'd never had any reason to open a household lock, probably because I didn't have siblings. So I watched and took mental notes. All part of gaining life experience. Ray had watched Dr. Gill get her file out once, during her session, so she knew where they were kept. The office had an all-in-one printer, which made things easy. I stood guard. The only hitch came when she copied the pages. The swoosh shush of the scanner head loud enough to make me nervous. But the files must have been short, because by the time I looked in, she was returning them to the folder, copies made. She passed me 2 sheets, folded in half, then she returned the file to the drawer. We backed out of the room. As she re-engaged the lock, the unmistakable sound of a creaking floorboard made us both freeze. A long moment of silence passed. Then a fresh creak. Someone was coming down the boys' stairs. We took off, padding barefooted down the hall. At the half-open kitchen door, we darted inside, then into the open pantry. "Come on," I stage whispered. "Just pick something already. I can't find the Rice Krispie bars. I know there were some last week." "The guys probably," I stopped, then hissed. "Someone's coming. Get the light." She flipped the switch as I closed the door all but a crack. As I peered through the gap, Derek stopped inside the kitchen door. He left the light off as he looked around, moonbeams from the window casting a glow on his face. His gaze swept the kitchen and came to rest on the pantry door. I pushed it open and stepped out. "Cracker," I said, holding up a box. He looked at me and, in a flash, I was back in the basement, sailing through the air. My smile fell away and I shoved the box into his hands. "We were getting a snack," Ray said. He kept watching me, eyes narrowing. "I'll get the juice," Ray said, squeezing past. Derek looked over at the boxes we'd left on the counter. Proof that we'd only been raiding the kitchen. It had been my plan, and I thought it was so clever, but as his gaze swung back my way, the hairs on my neck rose and I knew he didn't buy it. I stepped forward. For a second, he didn't move and all I could hear was his breathing, feel the sheer size of him, looming there. He stepped aside. As I passed, he took a cracker sleeve from the box and held it out. "Forgot these?" "Right. Thanks." I took one and fled into the hall, Ray behind me. Derek followed us out but headed the other way, toward the boys' side. When I turned to go up the stairs, I glanced down the hall. He'd stopped outside Dr. Gill's office and stood looking at the door. We lay in bed with the lights out for 15 minutes, long enough for Derek to either tell the nurses on us or just go back to bed. My fingers kept brushing the pages I'd stuffed in my pajama waistband. Finally, Ray scooted over to my bed, flashlight in hand. "That was a close call," she said. "Do you think he'll tell the nurses?" "Nah. He was getting a snack himself. He wouldn't dare tattle." So Derek had just happened to get up for a snack while we were breaking into Dr. Gill's office? I hated coincidence, but surely the printer hadn't made enough noise for him to hear it upstairs. I pulled the sheets out and smoothed them on the mattress. "That's Derek's," Ray whispered as she turned on the flashlight. I tugged the second page free and held it out. "You want Simon's?" She shook her head. "That's Derek's second page. There wasn't one for Simon. You couldn't find it?" "No, there wasn't one. The dividers in the drawer are marked with our names, then the file folders are marked again. There wasn't a divider or a file for Simon." "That's weird, I know. Maybe they keep it someplace else. Anyway, you wanted Derek's, so I figured I shouldn't waste time searching for Simon's. Now, let's see what Frankenstein is in for." She moved the beam to the top of the page. "Derek Souza. Birth date, blah, blah, blah." She shifted the light to the next section. "Hey. He was brought to Lyle House by a children's services agency. No mention of that father they're always talking about. If child services is involved, then you can bet he's no dad of the year. Oh, here it is. Diagnosis: antisocial personality disorder." She snorted a laugh. "Yeah? Tell me something I didn't know. Is that really an illness? Being rude? What kind of meds do they give you for that? Whatever it is, they aren't working." She grinned. "Got that right. No wonder he's been stuck here so long." The hall light clicked on. Ray dove for her bed, leaving the flashlight behind. I turned it off as the bathroom door closed. When I made a motion to toss it to her, she shook her head, then leaned out and whispered, "You finish up. Find anything interesting? Tell me in the morning." Whoever was in the bathroom, Tori or Mrs. Talbot, seemed to take forever. By the time the toilet flushed, Ray was asleep. I waited a few minutes, then turned on the flashlight and read. With each sentence, the ball of dread in my stomach grew. Antisocial personality disorder had nothing to do with being rude. It meant someone who showed a complete disregard for others, who lacked the ability to empathize, to put himself in another person's shoes. The disorder was characterized by a violent temper and fits of rage, which only made it worse. If you didn't understand that you were hurting someone, what would make you stop? I flipped to the second page, labeled Background. Performing a standard background check on DS has proved difficult. No birth certificate or other identifying records could be found. They likely exist, but the lack of concrete information on his early life makes a proper search impossible. According to DS and his foster brother, SB, Derek came to live with them at approximately 5 years of age. DS does not recall or refused to share the details of his life before this, though his responses suggest he may have been raised in an institutional setting. Simon's father, Christopher B., appears to have taken de facto custody of DS, with no record of a formal adoption or fostering arrangement. The boys were enrolled in school as Simon Kim and Derek Brown. The reason for the false names is not known. School records suggest DS's behavioral problems began in 7th grade. Never an outgoing or cheerful child, he became increasingly sullen, his withdrawal punctuated by bouts of misplaced anger, often culminating in violent outbursts. Violent outbursts. The bruises on my arms throbbed and I absently rubbed them, wincing. No incidents have been properly documented, making a complete forensic study of the disorder's progression impossible. DS seems to have avoided expulsion or other serious disciplinary action until an altercation described by witnesses as a normal schoolyard fight. DS violently attacked 3 youths in what officers suspected was a chemically fueled rage. An adrenaline surge may also explain the display of extraordinary strength reported by witnesses. By the time authorities interceded, 1 youth had suffered spinal fractures. Medical experts fear he may never walk again. The single-spaced page of background detail continued, but the words vanished, and all I could see was the floor whipping past as Derek flung me across the laundry room. Extraordinary strength. Violent outbursts. May never walk again. They'd taken Liz away for throwing pencils and hair gel bottles, and they kept Derek? A huge guy with a history of violent rages? With a disorder that meant he didn't care who he hurt or how badly. Why hadn't someone warned me? Why wasn't he locked up? I shoved the pages under my mattress. I didn't need to read the rest. I knew what it would say. That he was being medicated. That he was being rehabilitated. That he was cooperating and had shown no signs of violence while at Lyle House. That his condition was under control. I shone the flashlight on my arm. The finger marks were turning purple. 16. Every time I drifted off, I'd get stuck in that weird place between sleep and waking, where my mind sifted through the memories of the day, confusing them and twisting them. I'd be back in the basement, Derek grabbing my arm and throwing me across the room. Then I'd wake up in a hospital, with Mrs. Talbot at my side, telling me I'd never walk again. When the wake-up rap came at the door, I buried my head under my pillow. Chloe. Mrs. Talbot opened the door. You need to get dressed before you come down today. My stomach seized. With Liz and Peter gone, had they decided we should all eat breakfast together? I couldn't face Derek. I just couldn't. Your aunt is coming by at 8 to take you out to breakfast. You need to be ready for her. I released my death grip on the pillow and got up. You're mad at me, aren't you, Chloe? I stopped moving my scrambled eggs around my plate and looked up. Worry clouded Aunt Lauren's face. Dark half-moons under each eye said she hadn't been getting enough sleep. I'd missed those smudges earlier, hidden under her makeup until we got under the fluorescent lights of Denny's. Mad about what? I asked. A short laugh. Well, I don't know. Maybe because I dumped you in a group home with strangers and disappeared. I set down my fork. You didn't dump me. The school insisted I go there and the home insisted you and Dad stay away while I adjusted. I'm not a little kid. I understand what's going on. She exhaled, the sound loud enough to be heard over the roar of the busy restaurant. I have a problem, I continued. I have to learn to deal with it, and it isn't your fault or Dad's. She leaned forward. It isn't yours either. You understand that, too, right? It's a medical condition. You didn't do anything to cause it. I know. I nibbled my toast. You're being very mature about this, Chloe. I'm proud of you. I nodded and kept nibbling. Seeds from the raspberry jam crackled between my teeth. Oh, and I have something for you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sandwich bag. Inside was my ruby necklace. The nurses called from the home and told me you were missing it. Your dad forgot to take it from the hospital when you left. I took it, fingering the familiar pendant through the plastic, then passed it back. You'll have to keep it for me. I'm not allowed to have jewelry at the home. Don't worry, I've already spoken to the nurses. I told them it was important to you, and they've agreed to let you have it. Thanks. Make sure you wear it, though. We don't want it going missing again. I took the necklace out of the bag and put it on. I knew it was a silly superstition, but it did make me feel better. Reassured, I guess. A reminder of Mom and something I'd been wearing so many years that I'd felt a little odd without it. I can't believe your father left it at the hospital, she said, shaking her head. God only knows when he would have remembered, now that he's jetted off again. Yes, my dad was gone. He'd called me on Aunt Lauren's cell phone to explain that he'd had to leave for Shanghai last night on an emergency business trip. She was furious with him, but I couldn't see how it mattered when I was living at the group home. He'd already arranged to take a month off when I got out, and I'd rather he was around then. My aunt talked about her plan for a girls' New York trip when I was released. I didn't have the heart to tell her I'd rather just go home, see Dad, hang with my friends. Getting back to my normal life would be the best post-Lyle House celebration I could imagine. My normal life. I thought of the ghosts. Would my life ever be normal again? Would I ever be normal again? My gaze tripped over the landscape of faces. Was anyone here a ghost? How would I know? What about that guy in the back wearing a heavy metal shirt, looking like he'd just stepped off the set of VH1's I Love the 80s? Or the old woman with long gray hair and a tie-dyed shirt? Or even the guy in a suit, waiting by the door? Unless someone smacked into them, how did I know they weren't ghosts, just waiting for me to notice them? I lowered my gaze to my orange juice. Oh, there's a plan, Chloe. Spend the rest of your life avoiding eye contact. So how are you adjusting? Getting along with the other kids? Her words were a slap, reminding me I had bigger problems than ghosts. She was smiling, the question meant as a joke. Obviously, I would be getting along with the kids. I might not be the most outgoing girl, but I could be counted on not to make waves or cause trouble. As I looked up, her smile faded. Chloe. Is there a problem with the other kids? And no. Everything's FFF. My teeth clicked as I snapped my jaw shut. To anyone who knew me well, my stutter was a stress-o-meter. There was no sense saying everything was fine if I couldn't even get the lie out. What happened? Her hand gripped her fork and knife, as if ready to wield them against whoever was responsible. It's not. Don't tell me it's nothing. When I asked about the other kids, you looked like you were going to be sick. It's the eggs. I put too much hot sauce on them. The other kids are fine. Her eyes bored into mine, and I knew I wasn't getting away with that. There's just this one, but it's no big deal. You can't get along with everyone, right? Who is it? She waved off the server tentatively approaching with her coffee pot. Don't roll your eyes at me, Chloe. You're at that home to rest, and if someone's bothering you, I can handle it. She released her death grip on the cutlery, set them down, and smoothed her place mat. That's not the point, Han. You have enough to worry about right now. Tell me who this boy is and I'll make sure he doesn't bother you anymore. He won't. So it is a boy. Which one? There are 3, no, only 2 now. It's the big boy, isn't it? I saw him this morning. I tried to introduce myself, but he walked away. Damien. I stopped myself before correcting her. She'd already tricked me into admitting my tormentor was a boy. I really wished that, for once, she'd just listen to my problems, maybe offer some advice, not leap in trying to fix everything. Derek, she said. That's his name. When he ignored me this morning, Mrs. Talbot said he was like that. Rude. Am I right? He's just not very friendly. But that's fine. Like I said, you can't get along with everyone, and the other kids seem okay. One girl's kind of stuck up, like my roommate at camp last year. Remember her? The one who... What did this Derek do to you, Chloe? She said, refusing to be distracted. Did he touch you? And no, of course and not. Chloe. Her voice sharpened, my stuttering giving me away. This is not something you hide. If he did anything inappropriate, I swear. It wasn't like that. We were talking. I tried to walk away and he grabbed my arm. He grabbed you. For, like, a second. It just freaked me out. I overreacted. She leaned forward. You did not overreact. Anytime someone lays an unwanted hand on you, it is your right to object and to complain and so it went, through the rest of breakfast. A lecture on inappropriate touching, like I was 5 years old. I didn't know why she was so upset. It's not like I'd even shown her the bruises. The more I argued, though, the madder she got, and I started thinking maybe this wasn't really about a boy bothering me or grabbing my arm. She was angry at my dad for taking off and at my school for making me go to this group home, and because she couldn't go after them, she'd found someone she could go after, a problem she could fix for me. Please don't, I said as we sat in the car, idling in the driveway. He didn't do anything. Please. It's hard enough. Which is why I'm not going to make this any harder for you, Chloe. I'm not stirring up trouble, I'm settling it down. She smiled. Preventative medicine. She squeezed my knee. When I looked out the window, she sighed and turned off the engine. I promise I will be discreet. I've learned how to handle problems like this delicately, because the last thing a victim needs is to be blamed for tattling. I'm not a Vic. This Derek boy will never know who complained. Even the nurses won't know you said a word to me. I'm going to carefully raise concerns based on my own professional observations. Just give me a couple of days. No, Chloe, she said firmly. I'm talking to the nurses and, if necessary, to the administrators. It would be irresponsible of me not to. I turned to face her, mouth opening to argue, but she was already out of the car. When I returned, Tori was back. Back in class and back in attitude. If I'd been scripting this scene, I'd have been tempted to go for a character reversal. The young woman sees her only friend taken away, partly because of a snide remark she made. When her housemates rally around, trying to lift her depression with support and concern, she realizes she hasn't lost her only friend and vows to be a kinder, gentler person. In real life, though, people don't change overnight. Tori started the first class by informing me that I was sitting in Liz's seat, and I'd better not act like she wasn't coming back. Afterward, she followed Ray and me into the hall. "Did you have a good breakfast with your auntie? Parents too busy for you, I guess. I'm sure Mom would have made it. But it's kind of hard for her, being dead and all." A great slap-down comeback. Tori didn't even blink. "So what did you do to deserve a pass already, Chloe? Was that your reward for helping them get rid of Liz?" "She didn't," Ray began. "Like you're any better, Rachel. You couldn't even wait until Liz's bed was cold before you bunked down with your new buddy. So, Chloe, what's with the special treatment?" "It's not special," Ray said. "Your mom takes you out all the time. In Chloe's case, it's probably a reward for good behavior. With you, it's just because your mom's on the board of directors. At our age, being well-behaved isn't exactly a goal to strive for." But Tori's nostrils flared, her face twisting, as if Ray had lobbed the worst possible insult. "Yeah," she said. "Well, we don't see your parents coming around, do we, Rachel? How many times have they visited or called since you've been here?" "Let's see, oh, right, 0. She made an 0 with her thumb and forefinger. "And it has nothing to do with bad behavior. They just don't care." Ray shoved her into the wall. Tori let out an ear-shattering shriek. "She burned me," she said, clutching her shoulder. "I pushed you." Ms. Wang hurried from the classroom, followed by Simon and Derek, who'd stayed behind to discuss an assignment. "Ray burned me. She has matches or something. Look, look," Tori pulled down the collar of her t-shirt. "Leave your clothes on, Tori," Simon said, raising his hands to his eyes. "Please." Derek let out a low rumble that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Ray held up her hands. "No matches. No lighters. Nothing up my sleeve. I see a very faint red mark, Tori, from being pushed," Ms. Wang said. "She burned me. I felt it. She's hiding matches again. Search her. Do something. How about you do something, Tori?" Simon said as he brushed past us. "Like get a life." She wheeled not on him but on Ray, lunging at her before being grabbed by Ms. Wang. The nurses came running. Yep, Tori was back. 17. I'd spent that first class braced for Miss Van Dop or Dr. Gill to stride in and yank Derek out for a conference. I should have trusted my aunt. When we'd come back from breakfast, she'd quietly taken Mrs. Talbot aside, saying only that she wanted to discuss my progress. No one thought anything of it. And no one had burst into the class and dragged Derek out. Tori's episode was the only bump in an otherwise quiet morning. Derek attended classes and ignored me. He went to his session with Dr. Gill before lunch. When he came out, I was in the hall, waiting to use the bathroom. Simon was inside, as he always was before a meal. I'd never known a guy to be so conscientious about washing up before eating. I was considering running upstairs to the girls' bathroom when Dr. Gill's door opened, and Derek's dark form filled it. I braced myself. He stepped out and looked at me. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it, just as sure as I was that he'd just gotten bawled out. Our eyes met. He nodded, grunted something that sounded like hi, and was about to brush past me when the bathroom door opened. Simon walked out, head down. He saw me and shoved something into his back pocket. Whoops. Guess I'm hogging the bathroom again, causing lines. Just Chloe. Derek pushed open the door for me. He didn't seem angry at all. Nicer than normal, even. My aunt must have handled it fine. I should have known she would. As I went inside, Simon said to Derek, "Hey, lunch is this way. Start without me. I gotta get something from our room." A pause. Then hold up, and Simon's footsteps followed Derek's up the stairs. After lunch, it was my turn to take out the trash. Life experience, I kept telling myself as I wheeled the wagon to the shed, swatting away flies buzzing in for a closer look. All life experience. You never know when I'd need a critical scene with the protagonist hauling trash. My laugh fluttered across the yard. The sun was shining, heat beating down on my face, tree and daffodils blossoming, the faint smell of newly cut grass almost masking the stink of rotting garbage. A pretty good start to my afternoon. Better than I'd expected. I stopped. There, in the yard behind ours, was a ghost, a little girl, no more than 4. She had to be a ghost. She was alone in the yard, playing outside in a frilly dress, a wedding cake confection of bows and ribbons, with more ribbons wound in her corkscrew curls and more bows on her shiny patent leather shoes. She looked like Shirley Temple off an old movie poster. I tossed the bags into the shed, where they'd be safe from marauding raccoons and skunks. The bags thumped as they hit the wooden floor, but the girl, only 20 feet away, didn't look up. I closed the shed, walked behind it to the fence, and crouched, getting closer to her level. "Hello," I said. She frowned, as if wondering who I was talking to. I smiled. "Yes, I can see you. That's a pretty dress. I had one like that when I was about your age." One last hesitant glance over her shoulder, then she sidled closer. "Mommy bought it for me. My mom bought mine, too. Do you like it?" She nodded, her smile lighting up her dark eyes. "I bet you do. I loved mine. Do. Amanda." The girl jumped back, landing on her rear and letting out a wail. A woman in slacks and a leather coat broke into a run, keys jangling in her hand, the back door whooshing shut behind her. "Oh, Amanda, you got your pretty dress all dirty. I'm going to have to reschedule your special photos." The woman shot me a glare, scooping up the little girl and carrying her toward the house. "I told you not to go near that fence, Amanda. Never talk to the kids over there. Never, do you hear me? Don't talk to the crazy kids." I longed to shout back that we weren't crazy. I'd mistaken her kid for a ghost, that's all. I wondered whether they had books about this sort of thing. 50 Ways to Tell the Living from the Dead Before You Wind Up in a Padded Room. Yep, I'm sure the library carried that one. I couldn't be the only person in the world who saw ghosts. Was it something I'd inherited, like blue eyes? Or was it something I'd contracted, like a virus? There had to be others. How would I find them? Could I? Should I? The thump of footsteps told me someone was coming. A living person. That was one lesson I'd already learned. Ghosts can yell, cry, and talk, but they don't make any noise when they move. I was still behind the shed, hidden from view. Like being in the basement, only here, no one would hear me scream for help. I dashed forward just as a shadow rounded the shed. Simon! He strode toward me, his face dark with anger. I stiffened, but stood my ground. What did you say? His words came slow, deliberate, as if struggling to keep his voice steady. Say. To the nurses. About my brother. You accused him of something. I didn't tell the nurses any. Your aunt did, then. His fingers drummed against the shed. You know what I'm talking about. You told her, she told the nurses, then Dr. Gill took Derek into a special conference before lunch and warned him not to bother you. If he does, they're sending him away. W.H. Watt. A word from you, and he's gone. Transferred. A vein in his neck throbbed. He's been perfect since he got here. Now, all of a sudden, after one problem with you, he's put on notice. If he so much as looks at you funny, he's gone. I. Something happened with you two last night, didn't it? Derek came upstairs completely freaked out. Said he was talking to you and screwed up. That's all he'd tell me. I considered the truth that I hadn't meant to tattle on Derek. I'd been quiet at breakfast and my aunt had figured out I was upset. But that might sound as if I'd been sulking, wanting her to drag it out of me. He'd all but accused me of making up stories, unfairly targeting his poor, misunderstood brother. It was hot at the restaurant, I said. So I rolled up my sleeves. What? I pushed my left one up, showing 4 bruises, dark as ink spots. Simon paled. My aunt wanted to know what happened. When I wouldn't tell her, she tricked me into admitting it was a boy. She met Derek this morning and he was rude, so she decided it had to be him. I never confirmed it. If he's in trouble, it is not my fault. I had every right to tell someone and I didn't. Okay. He rubbed his mouth, still staring at my arm. So he grabbed your arm. That's what it looks like. Right? He just grabbed harder than he thought. He threw me across the room. Simon's eyes widened, then he lowered his lids to hide his surprise. But he didn't mean to. If you saw how freaked out he was last night, you'd know that. So that makes it okay? If I lose my temper and smack you, it's all right, because I didn't mean to, didn't plan to. You don't understand. He just... She's right. Derek's voice preceded him around the corner. I shrank back. I couldn't help it. As I did, a look passed through Derek's eyes. Remorse? Guilt? He blinked it away. He stopped behind Simon's shoulder, at least 5 feet from me. I wanted to talk to you last night. When you tried to leave, I pulled you back and," he trailed off, gaze shunting to the side. "You threw me across the room." "I didn't yet, you're right. Like I said. No excuse, Simon. Let's go." Simon shook his head. "She doesn't understand. See, Chloe, it's not Derek's fault. He's super strong and you weren't wearing your kryptonite necklace," Derek said. His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Yeah, I'm big. I got big fast. Maybe I don't know my own strength yet." "That's not," Simon began. "No excuse, like you said. You want me to stay away from you? Wish granted." "Derek, tell her. Drop it, okay? She's not interested. She's made that very, very clear. Now let's go before someone catches me with her and I get stomped again." "Chloe." Mrs. Talbot's voice rang through yard. "Perfect timing," Derek muttered. "Must have ESP." "Just a second," I called back, moving sideways so she could see me. "Go on," Derek said when the back door banged shut. "You don't want to be late for your meds." I glowered, then turned away, circling wide around them as I started for the door. Simon murmured something under his breath, as if to Derek. Smoke rose in my path. I stumbled back. It hovered over the ground, like a low patch of fog. "Simon!" Derek hissed. I turned, pointing at the fog. "What is that?" "What's what?" Derek followed my finger. "Hey! Must be a ghost." "No, wait, you don't see ghosts. You hallucinate." "Guess it's a hallucination then." "That's not." "It's nothing, Chloe." He pushed his hands in his pockets, rocking back on his heels. "Just your imagination, like everything else. Now run along and take your meds and be a good girl. Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way from now on." Seems I made a mistake. A big mistake. He meant he misjudged me. That I wasn't worthy of his interest. My fists clenched. "Watch it, Chloe. You wouldn't want to hit me. Then I'd have to tattle on you." Simon stepped forward. "Cut it out, Derek. She didn't tattle." "He knows that," I cut in, holding Derek's gaze. "He's baiting me. He's a jerk and a bully, and whatever secrets he's taunting me with, he can keep them. He's right. I'm not interested." I wheeled, strode to the wagon, and grabbed the handle. "Here," Simon called. "I'll take that." "She's got it." I turned to see Derek's hand on Simon's shoulder. Simon shrugged his brother off. "Chloe." I wheeled the wagon back to the house. The rest of the audiobook will be continued in the next episode. Join us on Patreon for early access or more great audiobooks. A link is provided in the video description.